Hi there, my name is Carmen and I'm from the Suho Studio team. Today I'm going to be giving you a broad overview of a sustainable material selection. This adds another element to a holistic project, and once you add another layer to how you select materials and product, there are it's a lot of detail to delve into. This is just going to give you some criteria to consider. I'll also look at our 10-star house as an example and discuss some of the design decisions for the selections we made on this project. And then I'll go through some obstacles and challenges when choosing sustainable materials and the benefits and advantages. Traditionally, when a designer is selecting materials, these are some of the things that we would consider. We really want to make sure the material does what it's meant to do, consider its function, or to make sure it's fit for purpose. So for instance, a roof, it needs to be waterproof and weatherproof. External cladding needs to be robust and fire resistant. Definitely it needs to be fire resistant in bushfire zones, high-rise apartments and commercial buildings. Something like a kitchen bench, we need to consider that it's hard wearing and that it's going to last a long time. And things like concrete and steel, they need to be strong enough because they're the structural parts of the building. We also want the materials to look beautiful, so that's high on our consideration list. More practical is the financial costs of the material and meeting the budget of the project. For an example, we always will try to select things that will fit the budget, but when it comes back from costing, sometimes things are more than we expect. So things then have to be reevaluated and we need to choose different things. So for instance, if a client has chosen a marble benchtop, and it comes back and it's too expensive, we may need to choose a reconstituted stone instead, or a laminate that looks like marble to meet the budget. We also consider the availability of a material or a product. We always will be trying to select things that are available now in stock or have a short lead time. But when it gets to the final point of the builder, when he's actually ready to order the tiles or the lighting, sometimes there's things out of our control and the product's not available. So at that point, we may need to reselect. So to add to that list of criteria for materials, I wanted to talk about some extra considerations, and that's about thinking, is the product healthy and is the product responsible? So I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. But what we're trying to do is create a healthy and comfortable interior environment, and also think about choosing natural materials, things like timber, stone, glass. Consider local manufacture, and even rethink, do we have to choose a new product? Can we salvage something or use something that's recycled or has a recycled content? When to start choosing sustainable materials? Well, it's adding, if it's part of a holistic sustainable project, like everything, the best time to think about this is in the beginning and in the concept phase. So there's a lot to consider if you're already thinking about an energy efficient building and you're building for airtightness. You want to use technology and automation. You want to think about water saving fittings, having water tanks, solar panels, and sustainable materials. So your designer can assist you in including all these items at the beginning of the planning, so it's not an afterthought, because it's always more difficult to think about these things later in the project. So the questions we need to ask, the questions we need to ask about healthy materials and responsible materials is when we're considering the health of the material, it's ultimately, we're thinking about the health of the occupants to the building, but it's also thinking about the health of the builders and the contractors that are actually installing the product, and also the health of the environment. So how does that, making that product, how does that affect the environment? So in terms of what the product is made out of, just like the ingredients on the food packaging in the supermarket, when you look at the label of an item, generally they are listed, say for instance a can of tomatoes at the supermarket, generally the list of ingredients is listed in terms of proportion, so the highest ingredient first. And with a can of tomatoes, there's of course tomatoes in there, and then you look a bit closer and realise there's water and sugars, and then some things with numbers and additives, which is really your additives and your preservatives. Products and materials also have that available to you. So there, for all products and materials, there is a data sheet which is available by law, which you can ask for, and you will actually find there's quite a lot of chemicals in building products. The worst offenders are paints, adhesives, glues and stains, and things like plastics. PVC is quite toxic as an example. So these items contain things that are bad for us, but also bad for the environment. We also consider where is the product made, and that is more referring to the health of the environment, because if it's got to travel a long way, it's using a lot of carbon to do that. So going back to that example of the kitchen bench, beautiful marbles generally come from the other side of the world to Australia, like Italy. So to bring that here is using a lot of carbon miles. So you can reframe your thinking on your decision on that. You may decide that you don't use stone at all, or you may decide to use a stone that's more locally available. How is a product made? So when a product's made, as I said, some of them have a lot of chemicals in them. One of the things that can be in products is VOCs, which stands for volatile organic compounds. Although it has the word organic in it, they're still not particularly good for us. So volatile organic compounds happen in 2 points of the process. So they will be added when it's being made, and also they can be emitted when some products are actually installed. And basically what is bad for us is that what it emits and we breathe in is not so good over a long period of time. You can also consider, does the product use a lot of water and energy in its production? Is there a lot of chemical waste from manufacturing process being let in, say for instance, let into our waterways? When we get to talking about a responsible material, that is really considering the ethical side. So again, going back to a supermarket example, you have fair trade coffee or organic chocolate. When those kind of products have that label, you can be assured that it has been considered, that all the steps in the process are ethical. Where is the product made? Again, we ask this question, is it, and this is more about the ethical side, is it in a country with fair work practices? Does it have safe factories? We can also think about who is making the product. It may be child labour or even slave labour. Is it safe for the workers during the manufacturing process? So an example of that is there are some products that there's a lot of dust that comes when the product's being made, and this may be inhaled by the workers during the manufacturing process because they're not having to wear a mask, because the rules and regulations in that country may be different to something that's as we have in Australia with greater rules. We can also think about the ethical supply chain. This is more about products that have a number of parts, say an electrical item that has bits and pieces from all over the place, and then it's manufactured in one area, but the supply chain looks at the story of all those parts. And say another example is something like timber. There is a lot of steps in that process or supply chain, from the growing in the forest and going through all those steps, that it's milled and then it's used in different formats, whether it's cladding or MDF for joinery. These are some labels that will consider the ethical side of a product. Some other things to consider. We've talked about carbon footprint and impact. A way to measure that is a life cycle assessment. And life cycle assessments, again, measuring all the different things that happen from the beginning of the process, its manufacturer, how it's used, the end of life, which is more to, when I say cradle to grave, that's sort of what happens when it's turns to waste, or it can go even further and have cradle to cradle, which is then about thinking how can we reuse it, and in a recycled way, or change it. There are some carpet tiles that actually can just be sort of cleaned and then reused in its same format. So that then becomes a bit of a circular economy, which is what we want. So it saves things going to landfill. Another way to think of it is, do we have to have a new product? Does it have to be new? There's a lot of energy and resources that go into new. So possibly you could use salvaged or recycled. Salvaged is more about reusing or repurposing a product that's already available or has been used in a building prior. Say, for instance, timber. That comes to mind first. It just works really well. You can sand it down and it can look as good as new. Sometimes people reuse things like baths or kitchen joinery that they've got from another building, and then they can repurpose it in their new building. Sometimes windows can be reused also. Recycled can be a bit of a grey area. Although it's great that it's saved from landfill, if the product has already got some chemicals or toxicity in it, then you're sort of bringing that into the cycle. So it is still great to use 100% recycled or recycled content. You just need to look a bit into what is still, whether it's a toxic kind of product. I also talked about the VOCs previously in terms of emissions. So things like paints and adhesives and glues, they tend to have a lot of VOCs when they're made. There are some other products that actually emit VOCs when they're installed. So they are things, as well as paints and glues and adhesives, there's things like carpet and MDF, which is used for joinery, that once they're installed, they keep emitting some of those VOCs. Some of them are very obvious because they have a smell. So if you think about walking into a building when it's just been opened, there can be some unpleasant smells, and they possibly are the paint or the carpet or the glue that was used to lay the carpet. And there is ways of testing that. Just like we do air testing at Suho for ventilation and air tightness, there are some ways to test a building after it's, say for instance, the day. It can take a reading of the content of VOCs, and then they can test it again in 2 weeks or a month. And you can, so obviously you want to create a building that has less VOCs. We also can consider the construction waste on site, the packaging, and even down to having sustainable furniture and accessories. Because if you've gone to all the trouble to have this energy efficient, airtight building with sustainable materials, it's great to follow through and have sustainable furniture and accessories. Sustainable labelling, this helps with helps designers in making the choices. It can take out some of the time of the selection. You may not always find an option for every product, and you may just need to choose the best out of a bad bunch. and then sort of think about another sustainable reason that justifies that choice. And it's good to understand what all these different labels measure and what their criteria is to have been given that label. It's always good to, by choosing a product with this label, you know that it's been third-party verified and there's documentation available. Of course, there is a cost for the suppliers to get this label. So there's still products out there that don't necessarily have a label but are a perfect choice. You just need to just make sure that it's not a greenwash, so that they're just not in their advertising or marketing campaign saying that it's sustainable when in actual fact it isn't. But definitely choosing one with these kind of labels, you know that it's been tested, and also that the suppliers are keen to recognise that their product, and they've gone to the effort to get the label, so they're keen to recognise that their product is a good choice. There's also sustainable rating tools, which are a bigger picture. So that's actually looking at the entire project, and it covers a lot of different things, and one of the criteria will be looking in detail at the materials. So for this, many of these systems are applied to large commercial projects, but they can also be applied to residential. There is a cost to register for the client to register the project. And sustainability is multifaceted, and there's not one size that fits all. Generally, a project will focus on targeting one of these, as the different rating tools don't always have similar goals or requirements. However, some criteria for the different rating systems do have some crossovers where the intention is the same. Your ESD consultant can assist in an overview of how all these tools and frameworks work, and if the project already has a framework chosen, your ESD consultant will provide the guidance through the process to get the required rating. Okay, so we'll quickly run through an example of the 10-star house. Many of you who have been watching these webinars, the SUHO series of webinars, will be familiar with this building. Those who are not, I will just run through it quickly. We at SUHO Studio have designed and built a 10-star energy efficient house, which is currently under construction and is almost finished, and we will welcome to show people through by appointment. And you can sort of feel the difference of a 10-star house compared to perhaps some existing houses that we all live in. It is on a small site in eastern suburbs of Adelaide, and it's 310 square metres, which seems small, but this is generally the size of what plots are at the moment. Here is a sketch of our 10-star house, and later on you'll see a photo of the almost finished building, and it looks pretty close to what we envisaged. The current benchmark for a house is 6 stars, so to go above and beyond to 10 stars is really pushing the boundaries, but we're really happy that we've reached that challenge. This is a floor plan. This big arrow tells you where north is, and we have all our living areas facing north, which is what you want to make the use of passive design. This shows you the land size compared with the area of the house. It is a 3-bedroom house, and if you can see, there is also another building to the side adjacent to this 10-star house, which is an 8-star house that we have also designed and constructed, and that is also almost completed, and the 8-star will actually be up for sale. This is some images we had of the proposed interior. Another labelling system is the energy efficient star ratings. This graph shows you the energy used for a 6-star house as compared to a 10-star house. So some of the materials we chose were really trying to fit with our key driver for the project, which was energy efficiency. So these particularly had to be fit for purpose, which is what I talked about before, and support that goal of energy efficiency. Some of these materials in terms of sustainability do have a bit of a grey area. However, the fact that they help so much with thermal mass for the passive design, they are a good choice to support that. So concrete, bricks and aluminium have a high embodied energy, which means the total energy used in all of the processes is a lot. So the way that you can perhaps make a more positive choice is the concrete can be selected to have some recycled content or less cement. The bricks that we did choose on this project were recycled and locally made, and the insulation, we needed a very high R value to reach 10 stars. The insulation had a global green tag label and is healthier than other glass wall products, as it has no formaldehyde, which is a glue, and dyes in it. So this means it's healthier to handle for the builders on site. The glazing, we needed very high specification for this, and they're actually triple glazed. They came from overseas, so there is some carbon miles associated with that. But to reach that high specification, currently we couldn't find an Australian made product that could meet the high specification. And we did have to compromise on aluminium frames by using aluminium frames. But again, high spec was required and a cost came into that decision. So some of the other things we did for sustainable materials, we used a lot of timber in the building, and timber is always a good environmental choice. It was FSC certified, which was one of the labels that was on the earlier slide. Global Green Tag certification was for a number of the products, the plasterboard, some of the laminates, the reconstituted stone bench. We chose to select no chrome finish to the tapware. Chrome is quite a toxic finish. And we used low VOC paints and timber treatments. The obstacles and challenges to choosing a sustainable material, is that it's not always the first easy choice. There's sort of some go-to products that you just are easy, they're available, they're a good price. So it's not always the first choice. As designers, we need to do a bit of research, ask the questions of suppliers, particularly if there's no green label. However, at Suho Studio, we've got a suite or a library of products that we've used in the past, and we know is a good choice. We've got the expertise and knowledge to source other products and make them work for your project. Another challenge is that materials are not always the key driver for the project, and so it may fall further down the list to the other goals that the project has. Another one, we would love if there was 100% transparency about materials. However, that's not always possible. The suppliers have their proprietary ingredients, so they're secret herbs and spices that they're not necessarily going to let you know what they are. And these may be chemicals that we don't particularly want to use. So it's hard to get that information sometimes. There is a perception that sustainable materials are more costly. That's not always the case. Usually you can find a similar priced item, and we believe that if you encourage specification, it will bring the price down. Another challenge is the builders. They often have their usual suppliers. They get their paint from this person and they get the tiles from this person, and all of a sudden we're selecting on the schedules different things they're not used to, or it might be suppliers that they haven't used before. The product has a different construction method, It's different from the norm, so there can be some resistance from the builders, and then they may try to substitute. So you need to stand your ground. We've put a lot of time in the research and trying to choose the best choice, and good to stand your ground, but also consider to choose the battles of what's most important to the project. The benefits and advantages of sustainable materials is that you get a healthy and comfortable environment for the building occupants. You're going to have better indoor quality, and you're contributing to low carbon choices, and it makes suppliers accountable. The more we specify things, the more the suppliers are going to see that there's a demand for it, and it really helps to transition to a healthy materials economy. So here you can see a picture of a photo of the 10-star house, and it looks very similar to that sketch that I showed earlier. And finally, we had a lot of partners that helped in getting this building to happen. So we want to thank our partners for their contribution. We aim to choose partners that were aligned in values with SUHO and the project, that had sustainable products and/or those which contributed to the energy efficiency and monitoring of the house. We want to encourage a transition to a healthy materials economy. So, as I said before, it's good to support the suppliers that have products that do the right thing. There are many more great products out there, so we encourage you to explore and enjoy your sustainable material journey. SUHO Studio can assist with your residential and commercial projects, including materials, choices and advice. So please get in touch, and if you have any questions now, please feel free to add them in the chat and we can answer them for you. Thanks for listening.